Hello, it's Krista. So for this week's video presentation, we're talking about ways in which the digital revolution has changed some of the ways that we communicate with each other. And one of the ways that it's definitely impacted is the way in which we communicate through our mobile devices. Now, when I was thinking about this, I couldn't help but think about this blog that I had written for ICM 501, Mobile and Locative Technologies. It basically talks about this service called Dodgeball. It was an early social network check-in service, and it's a case study that Humphreys did on Dodgeball. So for the bulk of this presentation, we're going to be talking about that case study specifically because it shows the pros and cons of the ways in which social networks have affected our mobile locative technologies. But first, let's talk about Socialite. Let's hit on that just for a second. Now, Socialite, this was a service that allowed you to add information to coordinates in a space that would come up as an alert on your phone while walking past those said coordinates. It's also referred to as geotagging, which you may have heard of. But basically, you could essentially leave to-do notes at specific locations. Those to-do notes would look like this. And it allowed for you to alert your husband, let's say, to stop by Petco on the way home to pick up some dog food. But Socialite would buzz, this is how it would work, it would buzz his phone as he walked past or approached Petco's coordinates. And it was also a helpful service that visitors could use if you were, let's say, away at work and you had family or friends staying with you. You could simply bookmark your favorite restaurants, your stores, coffee shops, etc., rather than writing them down. Now, this allowed for your visitors to walk around while receiving recommended alerts as they passed by certain locations that you had already bookmarked for them to check out. It was also beneficial to newcomers to the area and checking out other reviews by people that had left these reviews about certain businesses in the area. Some people would even leave, sentimental stories in their tags of specific places, telling others about romantic gestures associated with these certain places, whether it's a tree in Central Park or, a specified storefront or restaurant or something like that. But it essentially allowed for the placement of virtual plaques throughout the city, and two different categories emerged as a result from the use of Socialite, which is communication about a space, where one could see reviews as they walk by, and then secondly, communication through a place where people could reveal personal, sentimental stories associated with certain places just by geotagging them. Another quick example I'm going to give you is geocaching. This is another service that allows for GPS-enabled treasure hunts by using GPS coordinates. You can basically go to geocaching.com, punch in your zip code, see if there's any active hunts nearby, or you can start one yourself. Now, I got into this in 2010 for nearly a solid year when I was living in Bloomington, Illinois, and it was absolutely a blast. I found my dog and I, visiting these parks that we'd been to a million times, looking at this tree and being like, how could I not have noticed this before? It's a lot of fun. I highly recommend it for those of you who like to explore. And it allows for other people to check in, and once you found a cache, you can take what you want of it. You can leave what you want with it to keep the hunt going, and then you update it online to let others know, what happened to it and what condition it's left in as well. And, a lot of people worry that these technologies contribute to social isolation, but I would highly disagree because they specifically enable social activity that was previously unavailable or unheard of. In the reading Mobile Social Networks in Urban Public Space, The New Media and Society by Lee Humphreys, he specifically examines a one-year case study of the previously mentioned service Dodgeball in order to see how the service was used to facilitate social congregation in public spaces with the concept of parochial space. The article explores how ideas of mobile communication in public space are negotiated in everyday practice with spaces and results in the rearranging of social and spatial practices. The idea of parochialization captures the sense of commonalities that emerge with participating co-inhabitants of a social space. Now, public space plays a necessary role in urban environments and allows for casual encounters through daily life that kind of gives someone a sense of meaning and power, and it also alleviates everyday stresses from work. Dodgeball specifically was owned by Google, based in New York City. It allowed users to join for free by inviting their friends. Now, Once your friends joined, you could then view your friends' activity much in the same way that we do with popular social networks today. Users would send a text message to the service that would then broadcast that message to your network of friends and alert them as to where you were with the interest in meeting up. Now, it was also integrated into Google Maps so that users could see a map of the check-in locations, kind of get a visual feel for the city as well as your friends' social scenarios. And Dodgeball, it was only available in major cities, but it did allow for a crucial view into the relationships between urban spatial practices and social networks. Data that was collected between November of 2005 and November of 2006 with 21 interviews from users in 7 major U.S. cities. It's important to note that the participants interviewed were the most active dodgeball users, and they didn't necessarily represent the dodgeball community as a whole, but there were 9 women, 12 men. They were all between the ages of 23 and 30 years old. 6 of the users were observed in person, and then Humphreys was also an active user himself during the case study. But the biggest thing is that themes began to emerge related to space that included public, parochial, private, and neighborhood. Now, while the responses were unable to be verified, if users did in fact lie, this too can be kind of considered as equally important in understanding cultural norms. So there's 3 kinds of urban social spaces. 1 is public, and that's a space where strangers inhabit. 2 is private, which is characterized by intimate and personal networks. And the 3rd is parochial, which is an urban social space that can be referred to as kind of somewhere in between the two. It's characterized by a sense of community. Rather, it's characterized by a sense of commonality among acquaintances and neighbors involved in interpersonal networks that are basically located within the communities. The term realm is a convenient way to describe these spaces. A good example Humphreys used was that when one person's parochial realm can be another person's public realm, and that sometimes people can sense when they've entered a parochial realm where those around them seem to know each other, but the newcomer is clearly not part of the community. Now, with the introduction of mobile social networks, public realms can then become parochial realms through a process called parochialization. The process, which is basically the process of creating, sharing, and exchanging social and locational information to contribute to a sense of commonality among a group of people in a public space. Now, by knowing where people in one's dodgeball network were, users would also know the social relations that were available to them if they decided to venture out to certain venues their friends had checked in at. It was also used to find out where your friends are when you got into town, and made former public realms into parochial realms by giving the user a sense of familiarity with those that occupied the space. You could effectively choose where you wanted to go depending on who was there. Using dodgeball could also make you feel popular to your out-of-town friends that had never even heard of the service, basically while ensuring new interactions for that friend in order to meet up with friends of yours. Another way dodgeball was used was to meet friends of friends. Now, while dodgeball certainly didn't cause for this type of interaction, it certainly did allow for it because friends would introduce you to their friends once you arrived. One user referred to this as the dodgeball effect, actually. It's an alternative way in which dodgeball began to be used, was as a trigger. It allowed users basically to warn their friends that, hey, hey, your ex-boyfriend is here. I doubt you want to show up. Just an FYI, heads up, that kind of thing. And then sometimes the same information used to, to facilitate congregations was also used to facilitate avoidance in this way. So this interaction can be referred to as parochialization without congregation, in that based on the situation, the familiarity with various urban spaces could lead to very different social decisions and movement through the city. People also began to use dodgeball to parochialize public spaces when they traveled in groups. This is really interesting too, because this allowed for users to basically check in from out-of-town festivals or events in order to ensure that they would meet up with people that they knew at a local pub in an unfamiliar city. So by using dodgeball in this way, it gave users a sense of who and what was around them, which allowed for these unfamiliar locations to become parochial realms. By sharing information through dodgeball, groups of friends could coordinate congregation in public spaces as parochial realms rather than public realms because of the familiar social relations therein. And a big way in which dodgeball users could coordinate congregation was through the process of redirection, which is basically the ability to act on information via mobile phones in order to change or cancel plans while they are in progress, something that was never allowed before, or never afforded to us before, I should say. Redirection works best in cities proliferated with mass transit systems because everybody walks for the most part. Therefore, changing up your normal walking pattern from 2 blocks north and 1 block over to 1 block over and 2 blocks north means pretty much nothing if it ensures that you're going to be meeting up with a friend. So redirection is a part of the spatial practice of mobile social network use in the city. And then there were 3 factors that contributed to whether members used dodgeball to orchestrate congregation in public spaces throughout the city. And the first was timing. This factored in when the check-in messages received were too late, thereby rendering it difficult for redirection. The second factor, though, is spatial proximity, which means the distance from that person who sent the check-in message may prove to be too large or even discourage redirection. And the third was traveling time, in that sometimes, it wasn't easy to get from one neighborhood to another due to the public transit restrictions. But here's the thing, when you had the timing, the distance, and the traveling, and it all worked out, it all looked good, this allowed for redirection, and redirection was easily achieved in this way. In Humphrey's discussion, he notes that while some people believe that with the introduction of mobile communication technologies contribute to blurring the public and private boundaries, the parochial concept can be seen as a lens in which we can understand the complexity of privacy and publicness and how it relates to urban communication and spatial practices. New communication technologies have allowed for the change in spatial and temporal boundaries, but mediated communication continues to be shaped by locational and socio-spatial components. Dodgeball was just a service that allowed for social and locational information to be exchanged in order to encourage the shift from public to parochial realms by expediting the familiarity and the commonality among users in public spaces. So, as a result of many previously created technologies that have contributed to antisocial behavior in urban spaces like mail delivery or vehicles or water or heating for that matter, the parochialization of public realms through mobile social networks becomes important because they encourage active participation with urban users. So the use of mobile social media is kind of a niche market, but those who do use these services may experience urban cities in a completely different way than those who don't. Now, I do have much more on this, but I'm sure I've talked your ear off for now. If you'd like to hear more, feel free to check out this blog. It's located online at kristaleemyers.com/ICM501. Thank you.